Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Run in the Paint recap. I'm Miles here with Ben. Ben, how are you doing today?
Doing well, doing fantastic.
Gotta be fantastic, man. Who would have ever thought the Indiana Pacers are heading to the NBA Finals? Last night we had game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals. The Pacers following a loss on the road in game 5, but a chance to close it out at home. And boy, oh boy, did they take advantage. They defeated the Knicks 125 to 108 in game 6 of the conference finals to advance to their first NBA Finals in 25 years. Ben, my goodness, man, the Pacers came out and they played with that pace, the fast tempo that we didn't see from them at all really in game 5.
Yeah, they sure did. I was glad to see the Pacers get right back to that. Um, Knowing that was the brand of basketball they were gonna have to get back to to be able to have a good shot to win the game. And yeah, the Knicks had a really hard time with you know, stopping the Pacers when they were, playing pretty fast at times, and that led to some open shot makes for the Pacers. And also, the Pacers did a super good job at beating the Knicks in transition multiple times and getting big transition buckets quickly right away when they got the ball. And um, the Knicks still, I was disappointed though, still with how they hustle back defensively at times in transition against the Pacers. It was disappointing to me, but the Pacers, they are a really good team at doing that.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of buckets that the Pacers got off of made baskets was unbelievable. I mean, Pascal Siakam, who had another incredible game and ended up winning the conference finals MVP. I mean, the amount of points that he's gotten off of just transition and the Knicks falling asleep after they make a basket, there's got to be a lot. I mean, that's happened like 2 to 3 times in each win for the Pacers, and it led to him having a huge first half, 16 points in the first half. But yeah, absolutely. The Pacers' tempo allowed them to get back to playing their brand of basketball. And it was also beating the Knicks in transition off of makes and misses, but also forcing a ton of turnovers in the first half there. The Knicks had 9 turnovers in the first half. And I'm pretty sure that in the first half, I can't find the exact numbers here, but if I'm not mistaken, in the first half, the points off turnovers category was 16 to 2 in favor of Indiana in points off turnovers. And for the game, it was 34 to 13. I mean, that's just Indiana Pacers basketball, playing tough, hard, physical defense, getting up into Brunson and mainly Jalen Brunson, forcing turnovers, getting out on the break and getting a layup. I mean, that's Pacers basketball, and it was basically perfectly executed tonight.
Yeah, it was great to see the Pacers, get back to their brand of basketball. That's exactly what they needed to do. And how about Andrew Nebhart and his defense today? Unbelievable. He was able to get 6 steals, I believe, in this game. And um I think, he just did a phenomenal job of guarding guys like Jalen Brunson, and Jalen Brunson turned it over 5 times. He caused Brunson to have kind of a rough game tonight. So Andrew Nebhart, he came out huge in game 6 and really bounced back after a couple of rough games before game 6.
Yeah, he had 6 steals, as you said, 5 of them coming in the first half. And that was super huge for, of course, the Pacers as a team, but Nemhard individually, because in this series, he hasn't been, the most efficient offensively. His shots have not been falling like they have during the first 2 rounds. It's kind of reverted back to what it was during the regular season. But the defense that he played on Brunson, forcing turnovers, and even when he wasn't forcing turnovers, but just playing good, hard defense and making, Brunson take a difficult shot, it allowed him to get going there in the second half on the offensive end, knock down open shots, step back mid-rangers. He finishes with 14 points and 8 assists on 6 of 12 shooting. I mean, his two-way play was huge for the Indiana Pacers, and it led to his defense on Jalen Brunson throughout the game, who did struggle, 19 points on 8 for 18 shooting. Even though we're mentioning all these great things that the Pacers did in the first half, despite forcing turnovers and the Knicks missing free throws, which was super huge as well. It was only a 4-point game at halftime. Pacers were only up by 4 points at halftime. And reason number one was Mitchell Robinson's offensive rebounding. I mean, he was giving the Knicks a ton of second chance opportunities on the boards and even drawing loose ball fouls just to give the Knicks extra opportunities.
Yeah, he was really giving the Pacers trouble on the glass in the first half, but in the second half, of course, it was a kind of different story to that. I think the Pacers adjusted well to that. They did definitely a better job with the rebounding and crashing the glass in the second half. From what I saw, somehow Mitchell Robinson just couldn't really be a factor in the second half, which was disappointing. But I mean, I was impressed with his first half though.
Yeah, I mean, in the first quarter, he grabbed 5 offensive rebounds, which was a Knicks playoff record for most offensive rebounds in a quarter. Then didn't grab one the rest of the game, and in the second half was pretty much a non-factor. The Pacers did a great job on the glass in the second half, compared to the first half where they got out rebounded by 10 overall, and that was a big reason why it was still a close game in the first half. But to start the third quarter, Indiana came out of the locker room and knocked down a couple threes to push the 4-point lead up to 10. And from that point on, New York was just playing from behind, and Indiana was playing their brand of basketball. They were in rhythm, shots were falling. They scored 67 points in the second half, shooting 57%. So they were able to get it going. And I think right from the jump in the second half, the Knicks just didn't come out ready to play another half of basketball.
Yeah, Knicks they weren't ready enough. They didn't do enough of the adjustments, I guess, and seemed like to me the Pacers just looked even better in the second half and just as well from halftime. Looked like the Pacers tightened up even more defensively, were able to get more closely to Knicks players to force tough shots, and that allowed them to really get anything going. So that was pretty impressive how the Pacers were able to adjust and do even better defensively. And then, yeah, as you said before, the shots were just falling, and the Pacers did a great job at not being stagnant and moving quickly and finding good open shot looks and knocking them down.
And it came from a whole lot of different parties for the Pacers in that second half. Of course, Siakam kept it going in the second half. I mentioned Nemhard. Halliburton got off to a slow start offensively. He wasn't really able to get it going in the scoring department in the first half, but in the third quarter and definitely in the fourth quarter, he made some incredible shots in the fourth quarter with a lot of floaters, that scoop layup, and the deep three to really seal the deal there. Halliburton with another huge game there in the second half, a big bounce back after being a non-factor in game 5. And then off the bench, Obi Toppin, 18 points off the bench. And Thomas Bryant, man, are you kidding me? Thomas Bryant coming in, knocking down 3 corner threes after being out of the rotation earlier in this series because Tony Bradley was just, the better fit in this series. Bradley goes down with an injury. Bryant comes back in and has one of his best games in years to give the Pacers that lift off the bench.
Yeah, Thomas Bryant, great to see him finally be a factor for the Pacers, and yeah, it seems like he's really proved his jump shot in Indiana. He can now knock down some threes over there, as he said. And Halliburton, he really took over and made huge plays at the right time to help seal the deal for the Pacers in the second half. Um, Saved Siakam and Nemhart, and yeah, Siakam. I think he deserved that Eastern Conference MVP. He came up clutch when the Pacers needed him in games throughout the series multiple times, and he's just put up some fantastic numbers this series, including a strong 31-point performance in Game 6.
Yeah, we should definitely touch on that. Pascal Siakam winning the Eastern Conference Finals MVP award, the Larry Bird Trophy. And he obviously had an incredible series after he got off to a great start in the first round, didn't have a lot of great games in the second round, but picked it up here in the conference finals. And you mentioned the great game he had in game 6, the 39-point game he had in game 2. He had 30 points in game 4, two huge swing games in this series. For the overall series, Siakam averaged 25 points, 5 rebounds on 52% from the field and 50% from 3, getting the conference finals MVP. I thought it was going to be very close between him and Tyrese Halliburton to win the conference finals MVP, and it was. It was a 5-4 win in the voting. For Siakam to win the MVP. Halliburton in the series averaged 21.6 rebounds and 10.5 assists, and of course had the huge game 4 and the huge legendary moment in game 1, that buzzer beating shot to tie the game and force that to overtime. But yeah, I think Siakam definitely was deserving. I am a little surprised that he ended up winning the award because of, just the run that Tyrese Halliburton has been on, but I'm glad that Siakam got the recognition that he deserved.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I was kind of surprised too, but I mean, at the same time, it's deservable for Siakam, and I guess I would have been fine if I were a guy. It seemed like it was hard to pick between those two. Both of them seemed to do great and around as good as each other, and they just had to make the hard decision to pick one. But overall, I was just, you know, pretty impressed with the Pacers against the Knicks, and they seemed to match up well against New York, and they, just took advantage of that pretty well for the most part of this series to win it.
Yeah, they definitely did take advantage. I mean, I think Rick Carlisle said it during the trophy presentation there, post game, where he was congratulating the New York Knicks on, a great season, but he said, congrats on a great season, but they just ran into a team that is on a magical run right now, and that is definitely the case. I mean, it's been a magical ride that the Pacers have been on. Rick Carlisle even said the same thing after the second round win against the Cavaliers. Ending two very good historic seasons across the league with Cleveland, their best season in franchise history without LeBron James, the number 1 seed, 64 wins. And then the New York Knicks making it back to the conference final for the first time in 25 years and ending both of those runs in very convincing fashion. I mean, 2-0 leads in all 3 rounds. Could have had all 3 series done in 5 games before this series where the Knicks held on in game 5. We were talking in the pre-pod lobby about the short or the long odds, I guess you could say, about the Pacers getting back to this point after making the conference finals last year. The odds were not in their favor at all. I mean, a lot of people, myself included, thought that last year was a bit of a fluke. They played injured teams, got to the conference finals, took advantage of the opportunities. But this year, they have proved that they belong in this space because of their incredible two-way play. We were looking during the pre-pod lobby at the preseason odds. Pacers were basically around the 15th to 17th range as far as opening odds to win the NBA Finals, and now they're 4 games away. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, if I was doing like a favorites list back then before the season started, I think I would have had the pace just a bit higher than 15th. I'm kind of surprised that many sites had them that low after coming off a conference final, and they were still being pretty talented, and had a good lineup going into the season. But I thought, even with the Pacers beating some injured teams last year, that the Pacers weren't a fluke and that they were pretty good. And, I thought they were going to be good this year, but not go as far as they did last year. When I made my season prediction before the season started on them. But yeah, they proved me wrong there, but that's for sure. They sure did have the talent to, get all the way to the finals, and great for them for working super hard all season and becoming even better as a team to make the finals.
Yeah, absolutely. On the screen now, I pulled up the Run in the Paint podcast Eastern Conference standings predictions, and you see Pacers overall as a podcast, we had them seventh. Joey and I had them finishing eighth, Jackson seventh, Nick sixth. So none of us were that high on the Pacers going into the season. And to start off, I mean, we were looking pretty smart. Indiana started 10-15 on the season, looking very inconsistent offensively. Tyrese Halliburton was not being aggressive, but then taking over, especially once the calendar flipped to 2025. I'm pretty sure that since January 1st, they were something like I think that they were like a 60 win team, like on pace to win 60 games, after January 1st hit. And I mean, they've just been playing so great this entire playoffs. And there's so much credit that has to go to that team. The just the structure of the team, the way that they've built this. The Indiana Pacers are a team that over the last like 30 years, they've never been bad. Like they've never been just downright bad. They've never been super great. That one NBA finals with Reggie Miller, a few conference finals dripped in there over the last few years, but nothing too spectacular. And those fans definitely deserve it. I mean, it's a great basketball, city, great basketball fans, and now, their team is 4 wins away from an NBA championship. It'll be definitely a challenge for them to pull off the job. We'll preview that, the NBA finals coming up here, but just the Pacers getting to this point, absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's just amazing. And yeah, I think he had them like six before the season started, like Nick. So yeah, I'm like super high on the meter, but yeah, I mean, with the Pacers, proving so many people wrong and people sleeping on them so many times this year, and what the players that they had, definitely really impressive that they're able to get to the finals, and now it's pretty cool for the Pacers that they have a shot to try and win their first championship in franchise history against the Thunder, but it won't be easy.
Yeah, no question about it. So, congratulations to the Eastern Conference champions, the Indiana Pacers, man. Still sounds crazy to say out loud that the Pacers are heading to the NBA Finals again, first time since 2000 that Indiana is going to the NBA Finals. But let's take a little bit of time to talk about the Knicks because the Knicks do go out here in the conference finals. It was their first conference finals in 25 years. Let's talk a little bit about their season overall and what it looks like for them heading to the offseason. Of course, heading into this year, they make the big trade, getting Carl Anthony Towns, trading Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo, and bringing together, this crazy team. Of course, they do that right before the season, but during the offseason, they extend OG Ananobi, who they picked up in the middle of last season. They trade a bunch of draft capital to the Brooklyn Nets to get Mikal Bridges, get the Nova Knicks in there together. Brunson takes a pay cut to get an extension so that all of his other, so that his boys can get paid with the team. And, during the season, at the beginning of the season, they are seen to be a team that was expected to get to the conference finals, as the second best team in the East, probably behind Boston coming into the year. And throughout the year, great offensive team led by Brunson and Towns, two all-star starters, there. But a lot of concerns during the year about the Knicks defense throughout the year. And no, them not getting a win against a top team throughout the regular season made a lot of us concerned that they wouldn't be able to make a ton of noise in the playoffs, but they come into the playoffs, they beat a Detroit Pistons team in the first round and then upset the Celtics in the second round to get to the conference finals.
Yeah, I was like a lot of people that I didn't think the Knicks were gonna get too far because they struggled against like the teams that were seeming like top teams of the league in the regular season. But I think the Knicks must have made some adjustments and figured out more how to beat teams like that with the way they looked in the playoffs, and it was obviously pretty impressive and shocking to us the way they were able to beat the Celtics, of course, in the second round. Man, we really didn't expect that. And overall, I think it was a pretty good, successful season for the Knicks because they did get to the conference finals at least. That's at least pretty good for them, but they did fall short though, being able to possibly bring a championship to New York. So yeah, that was kind of disappointing, but um. I think the Knicks should still be happy about the season and the way they turned things around. They got better in the playoffs, and I think going into off season, in my opinion, they should keep Tom Thibodeau. I think he did a pretty good job of coaching them in the playoffs, and he still is a pretty good coach. And I think he'd be best for them head coach wise moving forward. And I think they should try to keep most of their guys around and just kind of run things back in a open Eastern Conference next year.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely one way to look at it. I mean, they're a team that looking at their payroll, their top 6 guys, actually top 7 players in their rotation are all coming back next year. They're all under contract next season. The question's going to be should they make any moves since in this series you could say it was a little bit of a disappointment with some individual players. Josh Hart really didn't have that great of a series. The last couple of games definitely struggled. We didn't really mention him much about this game 6, but he frankly was brutal there in the second half. For the Knicks, they seem to look better when both Towns and Robinson were on the floor, which is something that we didn't see much during the regular season. And maybe that was part of why the Knicks struggled at times during the regular season. It worked out great in the playoffs. They end up starting a lot of games in the conference finals. I think that they definitely could look to run things back because you're right. I mean, the Eastern Conference looks to be very wide open next year, but I also wonder if there will ever be a better chance for the Knicks to be in this sort of position again. Because if you think about how things worked out for the Eastern Conference this year, I mean, this is about as perfect of a scenario for the New York Knicks as you could get. You beat Boston in round 2. That was gonna be, probably your toughest battle, defeating the defending NBA champions. You knock them out. Of course, Jason Tatum gets injured in game 4, but they still win the series. Cleveland, the number 1 seed, best team in the East all year, they're out in round 2. Milwaukee's out in round 1. Damian Lillard gets injured, so they're out. Philadelphia, who was seen to be, one of the top teams in the East this year, they basically aren't even in the picture at all because of injuries and just it didn't work out. Orlando had injuries, to that young and up and coming team that was seen to be progressing this year. So when you look at the whole landscape of the East, I don't think it could get any better for the Knicks in the East than it could have this year because you talk about wide open. This series was your wide open chance to get to the NBA finals. But Ben, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with you now. Actually, thinking over it because you know, you gotta you know kind of think about if the 76ers and the Magic can stay pretty healthy next year, then I believe those teams can be pretty good and tough and uh give maybe the Knicks or the Cavs or the Pacers in trouble in the East next year. And And yeah, um, definitely interested in seeing how this teams can bounce back. We'll have to see. Time will tell, but the next step. I mean, hey, I wouldn't be surprised if they did get back to the conference finals again next year. I think they're gonna be pretty good and talented again, and they gotta stay healthy though too. That'll be a question for the next. We'll have to see how they can handle that. But um, yeah, there are some tough teams that some people are forgetting about, like I mentioned in the managing of the 76ers, and that's why, I get what you're saying now. I agree.
Yeah, and you mentioned another thing that is also part of this being the best scenario for you. They were healthy. The Knicks were completely healthy. I mean, everyone was playing. There were no real serious injuries to where anyone had to miss a game. I don't, this is a team that for years the question has been, can they stay healthy because of Tom Thibodeau's, short rotations of playing his starters all those minutes, both in the regular season and the playoffs. He played his starting five 35 minutes each per game. I mean, Carl Anthony Towns in the regular season was their least, minutes played for their for their starting lineup, and he averaged 35 minutes per game. I mean, they were all, I assume, top 10 or top 15 in the league in minutes per game. Same thing in the playoffs as well. So in the offseason, I think that, running it back is probably not a bad idea because you did find things in these playoffs with the Towns and Robinson unit there together. Question is going to be, can Robinson stay healthy? That's always a big question with him. Um, and with all your other guys, your top 7 players still under contract, try to get some more depth. Try to get some more depth so you don't have to be running just a 7 to 8 man rotation in the regular season. I mean, we saw in these playoffs, Tom Thibodeau didn't really even trust his bench until what, game 3, game 4 of this series when the Knicks backs were against the wall.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And yeah, thinking that some depth pieces that's true that will definitely help. That could lead to maybe some possible injuries next year. I mean, if you're having to rely on your starters that much and you don't have great depth and you're going with like 7 man rotation, say, next year. So, yeah, that's definitely something the Knicks should um look into for sure. I mean, I think, that could give the Knicks, a good chance, possibly being able to get back to where they were this year, next year, if they can add some good depth and hopefully give the starters more of a break sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that the number one thing to look for them with looking for more depth is probably trying to get a big guy, another big man, so that if Mitchell Robinson does go down with an injury or even Towns, or if there's foul trouble like we saw in this series, you have, an option to go to, that isn't Precious Achua, even though he was solid in game 5. There was a reason they didn't go to him that much in this series. I mean, it wasn't that big of a deal when you had like Isaiah Hartenstein, the last couple years when it was Randall and Robinson together. Now, if one of those guys is out, you can play Robinson, Hartenstein, obviously Hart at the 4, Anunoby. But now, if either Towns or Robinson are out because of foul trouble or injury, it's a problem. It's a huge problem. So I think that's probably the biggest thing they need to address. They're good on wings. Maybe one would be good. I mean, Landry Shamet had moments. DeLon Wright had moments as a backup point guard. Same with Cameron Payne, but I don't expect, maybe Landry Shamet will be back, but I don't expect those other guys to play huge roles next year. And I think, maybe we'll see Tyler Kolek. He'll be in his second year next year. He'll get some extra minutes there. But either way, would you call this season a success for the New York Knicks, Ben, with how things went in the regular season, so up and down, but eventually making it to a conference finals?
Ooh, that's a good question, Mubs. Um, Yeah, I mean, at first in the regular season, it wasn't looking like a success, but I mean, they made it to the conference finals, and ooh, it's kind of a tough question, but I'll give them a pass. I'll give them, yeah, it's a success. Because Um, it was pretty impressive how they took down Boston in the second round. That's for sure. That team. We were talking about for so long and thought, oh yeah, they have a good chance of making it to the finals. They were the defending champions. Super good again this year. And yeah, I couldn't believe how well they handled them and were able to beat them. That was pretty impressive. And they give the Pacers a decent fight, and they look pretty good against a tough up and coming Pistons team in the first round. So, I mean, with the way they bounced back in the playoffs and making it to the Eastern Conference Finals finally again, it's just enough to give it a success. And, also as well, we were sort of expecting the Knicks, to be a team that can make it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals, and they did at least, live up to what you know a lot of people did expect them to do before the season even started.
Definitely fair. I think you've convinced me. I think this season was a success because of the Boston series, the second round win against Boston. Because yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, they were the favorites to repeat again. I mean, they were having another, really good season. Looking destined to at least make a conference final. But Knicks ended that from happening. Of course, I mean the annoying thing I'm sure for Knicks fans, one of many things, is that they beat the Celtics but couldn't make it, past the conference final. I'm sure no one would have had that in the cards. Like, if you can beat Boston, you should be able to beat anyone, but that, obviously was not the case, and the Pacers ended up stopping them from that. So I guess I'll give it a success, for the roster that they had constructed. Because again, this isn't the most, deep team or anything like that. But before we move on from this, want to give a huge shout out to Jalen Brunson for just another incredible playoffs. We didn't really talk about him too much throughout this game because Andrew Nemhard did a great job making him frustrated. I think tonight was the first time that we really saw Brunson get frustrated throughout like the entire game. We even saw him headbutt Nemhard going back down the court that one play. But, besides, this game, he's been incredible again for the Knicks in these playoffs, and they should feel very, very comfortable with him as their number one guy moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. That's another you know successful thing for the Knicks that they figured out this season, that Brunson, really is their guy and who they should keep, you know, having on their team, for a while going forward, as he still is kind of young, not too old yet.
Yeah, kind of right in the midst of his prime there at 28 years old, as is the case for all these guys in the starting lineup. I mean, Carl Anthony Towns had a great year in the regular season, up and down in the playoffs. I think we saw how his defense and sometimes the lack of, I don't know. He's a physical player. I was gonna say lack of physicality, but there are some times where he kind of just goes wailing into the lane and nothing good comes out of it. But he had probably the best season of his career, at least in my opinion. Great years from OG. Josh Hart was fantastic in the regular season and in the first two rounds. And Mikal Bridges stepped up in certain moments. So all those guys had good years. So we'll see what they can do next year. I don't foresee a ton of changes with this team heading into next year, but yeah, we'll say congratulations on a successful year for the New York Knicks. I'll say it loosely. Getting it to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah.
So before we get out of here, let's quickly for a brief moment talk a little bit about this 2025 NBA Finals matchup. Since we now know it, it is now official. We have until Thursday to really talk about this. Thursday is going to be when Game One is. Indiana Pacers and Oklahoma City Thunder will be Thursday at 8:30 on ABC. OKC now will have a full week of rest after they took care of the Minnesota Timberwolves in the Western Conference Finals. I guess real quickly, Ben, now that we know that this series is official, Pacers and Thunder, what is the first thing that stands out to you when looking at this matchup?
Uh, I think to me, it's that the Thunder match up really well against this team. I think the Thunder, a big thing that stands out to me, for them that they'll have the advantage at against the Pacers is they got Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein. They got uh they they're tall. They're huge guys in the Pacers instead of guys really that tall, as those guys. So I think, this guy's you know, could get the Pacers in trouble in the paint and with the rebounding. So I love that matchup advantage for the Thunder. And I just think you know, a big question mark I'm thinking of going into the series is you know, how well will the Pacers, be able to shoot against the Thunder? Will they have some crazy shooting games to somehow get past the Thunder games, or will the Thunder just continue to just lock up by the perimeter and be super good at forcing turnovers against this Pacers team like they did against the Timberwolves?
Yeah, I think that that's probably the first thing that you look to is the kind of the turnover battle because Indiana Pacers throughout these playoffs have been forcing turnovers against, the three opponents that they've played throughout these playoffs. But OKC is like the best defense that we have seen in quite some time. And the Pacers have not had to go up against a defense quite like the Oklahoma City Thunder. So I guess the number one question to me, the first thing I look at with this series is how well the Pacers can play against a team that's kind of assembled like theirs to play kind of a similar style of basketball. OKC does play a little slower than Indiana, but defensively, it's the same principles of, you know, playing, up and pressuring the guy with the ball up near half court and forcing turnovers and scoring baskets off the turnovers. I think that's the first thing is how well can the Pacers play against kind of their own style of play.
Yeah, that'll be interesting too. And I agree with you. Both teams like to, really try to force turnovers and then get out and transition and make big plays out of transition. So, yeah, we could get some fun transition battles in the series. That would be cool. And yeah, that's kind of really all I got to say for now.
Yeah, definitely, because we've got a whole lot of time to preview and then eventually predict this series, which we will do. Podcast will release on Tuesday morning, the 2025 NBA Finals preview and predictions, where we will fully break down this series between the Indiana Pacers and the OKC Thunder. Again, game one not until Thursday night from Oklahoma City at 8:30 on ABC. Both of these teams who have never won a title in their current, formation. The Pacers haven't in the NBA. I think they did it way back in the ABA, and obviously the Thunder haven't done it since they've moved to Oklahoma City. So two teams that haven't seen a whole lot of finals action before. So excited to see how that pans out. But we'll save the final, the in-depth finals talk for later. Besides that, I think that's all we've got here for today. Ben, you have anything else before we get out of here?
Uh, nope. But I mean, I can't believe how fast the season's gone by.
It really has flown by, and the fact that the Pacers are still playing, incredible, incredible. Pacers Thunder in the NBA Finals. Cannot wait to predict it and eventually watch those games. If you guys enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe for more NBA postseason content. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you in the next one.